Okay, so let me get on to the main meat of today, which is how to begin a difficult conversation. Now, summoning the courage to begin a difficult conversation is often, I would say, it's a bit like taking a sip out of a hot drink, because what it actually is like is you were just putting the cup to your lips, and you don't quite know whether it's going to burn you or not. You don't quite know if you're going to be scalded by the drink. So there is a point of no return when you really have to, I suppose, just take a leap of faith. And that's really what we're talking, that the moment that we're talking about this morning. Bearing in mind that it's not always possible to overcome those fears. Sometimes we'll pull back and avoid the situation. We'll walk the other way as we see the person coming down the corridor towards us. Sometimes we can manage to actually talk our way out of it. We can decide that we'll try and talk sense to ourselves. We'll say, well, it won't be so bad. What's the worst thing that can happen? And so on and so forth. But very often that's not enough. And so what I want to talk about today is, how do we still get ourselves to make that start? What do we have to do in preparing ourselves and in actually executing the first few moments before we actually say something? So that's what this is about. It's probably about that first minute or two when we're about to take action. So the way this morning's going to go is we're going to have a poll. I want to ask you where you are at the moment in your thinking about how to begin a difficult conversation. Then I'm going to do about 35 minutes of material with you. And then we're going to have a Q&A session, and then another poll at the end, and maybe in injury time some more Q&A if there are questions remaining. So that's how the morning is going to go. At any time you have a question, as I said, please just ask away. Okay, so first of all, let's get that first poll out. So your response to this question: I currently have a good way to get myself to have a difficult conversation. So the majority vote here is I'm okay sometimes if I'm in the mood. This close behind, I often find a way. Oh, so we've got some experienced and confident people on the call this morning, and then a few people who are extremely honest. I tend to avoid and minimise anything like that. Quite a few of you, almost a quarter, tend to put that sort of thing off as long as you can. And of course, that's a very natural tendency. And a few really streaking ahead. And it would be nice to hear from one or two of those 10% about how you do it and whether your ideas and mine overlap at all. So thank you for that one. All right. So we have these warning signals, don't we? We have built up our experiences over the years as we're growing up as children and young adults. And we build up a set of experiences. And sometimes those experiences take us in a particular direction. Part of this, I think, is the way that we actually prepare. So what is it that we can do to prepare ourselves even before we've opened our mouths? Well, I think there's a particular trick to this, and the nice bit is that it emphasizes simplicity. So what I'm going to say to you as the first thought today is that preparation has to be really, really simple. Now, why is that important? Well, you could say, well, I don't have so much to remember then, I don't need to waste time on it. And yet other people would be saying, well, actually, if it's such a big deal, if it's so important, I need to prepare very carefully indeed. Well, yes, there is an element to that, but I want to show you exactly what it is important to spend time on and what is just going to be a waste of time and is just going to make you fret. So here's the reason to keep it simple. First of all, Some of you who have been hanging around for a bit and have been on these webinars before will have seen this circuit diagram before. It's one of my absolute favorites because it is really the basis for the whole need for us to pay attention to feelings. Now, if you studied physics or electronics, or which actually there's highly likely that one or two of you have, then you may recognize a really lousy circuit diagram here, but it does seem to work. Okay. So these are light bulbs, as you'll probably be familiar, even if you have to cast your mind back many years like I do to your education. And these light bulbs, let's say this circuit is currently lit. Now, I haven't quite finished down here. This component here, as you also may know, is a circuit breaker. Now, all good circuits, ours included, have circuit breakers. Now, this particular circuit is our neural anatomy, or our neuroanatomy. This light bulb here on the right represents our ability to think. And there we go. That was interesting, wasn't it? I'm obviously on my mettle this morning because I couldn't even think about which one was think and communicate, and I got it all jumbled up. So there's an example of this circuit in action. Presumably, because there are lots of you on the webinar this morning and I'm really trying to get it right, my light bulbs are flickering ever so slightly. So that's really interesting. It's a live example of circuits and what happens when they malfunction. So anyway, back to the action. This is the thinking light bulb, and this is the communication one. Now, obviously, we're just speaking figuratively here, but these light bulbs represent our two core capabilities, the things that we really, really need to be able to function, never mind in a difficult conversation. However, when we have too many feelings happening, as I am starting to have this morning, then those feelings start to tamper with the circuit's integrity. It just after a bit gets too much. And when that happens, the whole thing starts to unravel and it actually goes out. Temporarily, it is known as flooding. And that's a neural sort of catastrophe which lasts anything from a few seconds to a few minutes to a few hours. And it means that actually our ability to function is seriously impaired. We just can't think straight, we can't communicate, and we do all kinds of behaviours that we can see but we know are not useful. But we're damned if we can stop ourselves from actually doing it. Okay. How do we maximize the chances of our light bulbs staying lit? Well, the first thing, as I said, is to prepare very simply. But what am I asking you to prepare? Okay, I'm simply going to ask you to prepare two statements. So the first statement I'm asking you to prepare, or I'm going to suggest that you prepare, is what we might call the opener. The second thing I'm going to suggest that you prepare, and the second and the only other thing to prepare, is one truth. So a one sentence opener and a one sentence truth. And I'm going to give you an example of that in a couple of minutes. When we prepare long speeches or try to gentle our way into the conversation, thinking that we're sparing our feelings and we're sparing the feelings of the person that we want to begin the difficult conversation with, that's when it really, really goes horribly wrong. So here are three things to avoid when you're beginning a difficult conversation. The first thing, and this is a phrase, these are words or phrases I'm going to give you now, the things that I think have a really bad effect on us, but particularly in this first case, on the other person. So here's the first one. Classic. Can I have a word? That is enough to strike fear into any person's heart. And actually, I've put a question mark in here. Of course, we know that it's not a question, it's an order. Another one is, do you have a second? Or Could you step into my office for a bit? All of those questions are pretending to sound polite, but we know that they are direct instructions. Okay, here's the second type of thing to avoid. And this comes up on the programs and in coaching a lot. A bit, a little, and you'll see what this pertains to particularly in a few minutes' time, and slightly. So these are words, these are called modifiers, to use the jargon, and these try and gentle our language. They try and make it more palatable when we have something difficult to say. I'm a bit confused, I'm a bit annoyed, I'm a little frustrated. And actually, we know that people don't mean a bit or a little or slightly. They mean often a lot, but they can't quite bring themselves to say it. And so one way or another, it slightly lets us off the hook. Or it lets us know that they haven't got the courage of their convictions. But one way or another, it's not great. The third type of avoid, or third thing that I'm going to ask you to seriously consider crossing out of your vocabulary is just this one word. Why? And that'll become clearer in a minute when I actually give you an example of the opener of the words that we can say. But the truth of it is that there is no point in preparing lots of words, and actually I hope you're getting that there is actually no point in saying things like, can I have a word, or a bit or a little when we're trying to describe what we're thinking or feeling. And there's no point asking somebody why they've done something, or as a way of starting this difficult conversation. Because let's face it, the difficult conversation is often about some feedback or something that's gone wrong. And questioning somebody, drilling somebody before you've had the conversation is really a terrible way, or a very effective way, depending on your mindset, of lighting the blue touch paper. So let me give you an example of this one sentence, of the opener and the truth. So here it is. So the opener might sound like this. I want to tell you how I was after the budgeting meeting this morning. So that's all you need to say. You need to just tell the person, what is it you want to talk about? I want to tell you about how I was this morning after the budgeting meeting. I want to tell you about how I thought the meeting went yesterday after the clients left. And then the truth. And this is the bit that people most often fudge. And here's my example for you. So I'll get to do the first sentence again. I want to tell you how I was after the budgeting meeting this morning. I was annoyed. You changed quite a few of the important numbers without first consulting me. And then it's a pause. This is where most people stick the why in. Why did you do that? Okay, so I want to step back from this. So what have we got so far? What I'm asking you to consider doing when you're preparing for a tough conversation is to keep it really, really simple. Use just one opening statement, one sentence. Use one truth, and that is it. And that simplicity of preparation means that you don't have to stress yourself by remembering a whole load of words and questions and clever stuff. The very clever stuff that abandons us when our circuit falls apart, when this trip goes. So the less mental loading you're giving yourself, the better the chance you have of making a clean, simple start to your difficult conversation. Those are the things to avoid. And I actually, there we go. I actually stuck those in the wrong place. So let me correct that little error, and because we might need to come back to that screen in a little while. There we are. So there, interestingly, so this is a pretty complex, these webinars are quite complex. There's a lot to them. I do a lot of preparation. As you can see, there are a lot of screens involved. So this is really a really good example of even though I have prepared extremely well and I enjoy giving these webinars, even so, my nervousness of getting it wrong is making me make mistakes which I didn't make before the microphone switched on and before everybody started joining the room. So here is a living example of a flickering circuit. Now, interestingly, and I was going to say something, but I'll come back to that in a second, because there's something interesting going on, which I want to share with you in a second. Okay, so the first words, what about introductions? People often think that if they can just find the right words, they'll make a start. So what they tend to do is put together some sort of stock phrases. And I was speaking to somebody on a coaching session yesterday, and she's the head of HR, and she developed some nice, easy introductions to difficult conversations. Now, of course, you will know if you're an HR person, most of your life is spent having difficult conversations, which is probably why this webinar is the most popular one we've ever run. We've never had so many people logging into it. So it's obviously a common appeal. If I have to be absolutely brutal about having these stock approaches, and I was reluctant to say something yesterday during the session because I thought, this lady, she's very, very experienced, and I don't want to ruin her shtick. I don't want to ruin her technique. But really, if I'm honest, what I would say is that the one approach that I think works the best of all in these situations, in terms of how to begin, what words to use to broach the subject, I would always go for the no words at all approach. Because if I give myself something special to say, like this morning during this webinar, I immediately increase the chances of me stumbling, making a mess of it, having to play for time. And I also have a rather unfortunate effect on the other person as well. And I'm going to quickly show you that as well. The unfortunate effect is about what happens to our feelings when we don't know what's going on. And if we think about, this is a graph in time-honored tradition. I'm going to put time along the bottom. This is one of my favorite illustrations because it really nails it for me very graphically. So if I think about this side of the graph, we'll label that stress, very stressy up here. And not bad, mildly neutral or happy there. And this on this side, double y-axis, really just to challenge you this morning, up here is less able to think, less able, more able to think. Now, the long preamble actually means that we have longer to get distressed. So if I start here and say, oh, hi, Matt, I was wondering if I could, could you just step into my office for a second? I just wanted to have a little chat about something that happened yesterday. So that was what was that? Something like 10 seconds. Now, in 10 seconds, I think I can do away with most of Matt's ability to think straight and feel comfortable. Contrast that approach with the no words at all approach. Matt, I want to talk to you about something that happened yesterday that I'm not happy about. What's that? 3 seconds. At that point, Matt would probably say, oh, should we go into my office? And we'll both drift into the corridor. So Matt, the other person involved in this difficult conversation, is involved. And then at that point, at the 3 second point, maybe we walk for a few seconds to a place where we can talk. And then I say, I was really unhappy this morning when you contradicted me in front of the client. So the no words at all approach saves everybody a lot of stress. And if you think that's where we might have ended up, obviously this is a very rough indication, but I think you'll recognize the truth in this, that is the quicker we get to the point, the less distressing it is for us and them. And therefore, the more likely that the conversation is going to happen at all. Okay, a question for you, something to just think about, not too hard. What do you tend to do? What have you noticed that you do when you become uncomfortable? So the place, put it into the questions tab. Quick one-liners. What do you do when you get uncomfortable? What is your tick? I talk a lot. I also blank, like I have a couple of times this morning, not partial blanks, not quite the total eclipse, but I'm thinking, oh rubbish, where am I? And I looked down at my script and then I found myself. What do you do? Okay, we have one person says they talk too much. Another person, they must be sitting in the same room, says I talk, I waffle. Somebody says they stutter. They try to explain a lot. Someone else gets their words mixed up. Somebody hides behind policy. Another person talks randomly, babbling, trying to make. Oh, I'm interested in this one. Trying to make a joke of it. Oh, that's very good. Someone else gets defensive. I talk a lot to fill in the gaps. Yes, that's what I do as well. A slight stammer. That's an interesting one. And of course, when we hear or see ourselves doing these things, it just makes it worse, doesn't it? Say that, someone else says the same things in different ways. And that's very clever. Somebody said they ask the other person how they feel. That's a fantastic bit of deflection. I think I might copy that. I think someone else just added one. Look away. Okay, so we all suffer together, don't we? It is so obvious. And the miracle is that we don't have a sort of social way, a common social code for being able to deal with it. So here's a possibility that I want to put past you. So here is an unusual possibility. Again, people who know me well may recognize this, but it's interesting, even people who've been hanging around or I've even worked with for years in certain cases, sometimes when push comes to shove, this bit still escapes. And that's why I'm never afraid of mentioning it, because I think it's such a cool trick. If you find yourself doing those stock behaviours, the get out of jail behaviours, which actually don't get you out of jail, here's what I suggest you do. And it is so simple, but I warn you, it is radically different from what you've done before. I suggest, first of all, that you say how you feel. Just come out and say how you're feeling. And the second thing, if you can spit out the words, is what about? So how does this sound? Well, it sounds something like this. I need to explain something tricky to you, Peter, but I'm nervous that you might not like what I have to say. That act of actually telling the truth about our feelings seems to have this magical effect of dispelling the feeling or doing away with its worst effects. And that's what I'm suggesting you do. There is something around in the literature called the communicative theory of emotions. My doctoral supervisor is someone who subscribed to it. He's written books and books on it. They're terribly complicated, but here's the essence of it. Here's why some people think talking about our feelings helps. So if you're a bit of a geek like me, you'll like this. Feelings have a purpose. The purpose is to communicate with the world, with the people in the world, and with ourselves. When we cut that purpose short, when we circumvent it, when we block the output of the purpose, which is to communicate the message, then it really messes up with our psyche. We can't handle that. So we need to really let feelings do their job. And in operational terms, letting feelings do their job is about speaking about them. It is the quick way to reconnect the circuit, to reset our circuit. And that is how, in fact, we can make discomfort work in our favour. We actually only have to talk about it. And that is the one and only thing that I would put before the opener. So potentially we've got a 1, 2, 3 situation. The feeling, if we're having too much of it to be able to operate properly, the opener, the opening statement, and the truth. And that's it. I think you'll agree that's not too much to prepare. That's not too horrible. Okay. So some people are saying, well, that's fine, Paul. That's absolutely fine and dandy. But what happens next? What am I going to do when I've said what I needed to say? I've kicked off the conversation. That's fine. That's cool. I haven't jumbled up my words because I kept it really simple. I actually talked about my feelings, said how uncomfortable I was to be doing it, which also helped. But now I've got this sneaking suspicion, or actually this mounting worry that something is going to go terribly wrong for me. They're going to react badly. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't like uncertainty. And all sorts of things could go wrong. Well, now I'm going to ask you to leave the world of the material, of the things that we can prepare really well, and enter a dark, murky, conceptual world where you actually don't know, and I don't know what's going to happen, except for one thing. And the only thing we know about, that it's not about something that we can prepare. And that is all we can tell about the unknown. It's a place where it's not about the words anymore. It's about feelings. The only thing you can do to help with dealing with the unknown is to listen to the feelings, is to pay them attention. So here is a thought for you. So imagine, and here's how this bit works, and this is the magic bit, I think. And I'm going to just put together some sort of shape here. Now, you will all be familiar with blue tack. So blue tack is this wonderful amorphous thing that you can put into any shape at all. Now, the way I think about blue tack is this kind of really clever stuff that molds to anything you like. And I think of empathy as the same thing. Now, you've probably seen, some of these sort of Mission Impossible type films where they get a bit of blue tack or something like that, and they mold a key to it so that they can pick the lock, or they shove it into the lock, and it means that they can actually get into the strong room or the safe or the computer or whatever. Well, I think empathy is just like that. Empathy is like a piece of blue tack that we use to mold our responses, to mold to the other person, so that they know that we're really paying attention to where they are, what they're feeling and what they're thinking. And by molding to these people, to the other person that we're involved with in this difficult conversation, we can stay in touch with them. Now, the really cool bit is that they know that we're paying them a very high level of attention. The even better bit is I don't even have to think about what to say. All I have to do is wait and pay attention. The other person will give us all the material we need to progress through the conversation. They will be doing all of this molding. We just need to turn up with this rather magical empathy blue tack. This empathy blue tack that we just mold to them, and we keep on taking impressions. And we do this using statements like, you sound, you seem, and then the name of the emotion. Annoyed, worried, embarrassed, and so on. And that shows them that we're paying attention, and that will diffuse absolutely any response you get. So maybe this is the most exciting bit of all. You don't actually have to prepare very much at all. Once you've got your few words out that you have talked about, all you have to do is to prepare to listen. Because that's really going to deal with all the unknowns that you would normally manage to dream up in a nightmare scenario. So just to summarize, what we're looking at here is an opener, is a truth. And if we really are freaking out at the prospect of having this conversation and we notice ourselves doing our little tics, then we can actually tell the person how we feel about the prospect of even having the conversation. And so you've got a very simple set of steps, which frankly you don't even need to write on the back of a really unfashionable fag packet now. How you feel, the opener, the truth. And just remember to pay attention to whatever comes next. So for me, success in this kind of difficult conversation is not about having a smooth conversation. It's not about it going nicely and everybody behaving themselves. It's actually about having a conversation that really covers the material. Real conversations are scruffy, they're unpolished. And in fact, when a conversation is a bit stop-start and occasionally nobody knows quite what to say, that means when that happens, it means that we are really having a conversation. We're having a real conversation where we're doing something which isn't scripted, which isn't perfect, but it is getting down to the real stuff. And then I think we've had a successful, difficult conversation. And by preparing in this way, we've made it successful on purpose. And we can do that again and again and again. So that's the material that I have for you. And I'm now going to just open up the Q&A pane. Actually, before I do that, what are we now? We're 11 minutes past. I'll answer a few questions. Then we're going to do a closing poll. But since we have a couple of minutes, let me just see what questions we have here, if any. Carolyn, you have your hand up. Would you like to say something? Would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I would.
Oh, great. Fire away. Hi.
I really enjoyed what you said, and I've come across this material before in a different guise, albeit, but the neuroscience is very interesting. I'm interested in your thoughts around the moulding tack, around the blue tack.
Yes.
And proving then that after that, all you want to do is listen and pay attention. My concern is that when you use the expression you sound or you seem, you sound annoyed, you seem distressed, you seem worried, you seem embarrassed, whatever it is, that you get it wrong. Because if somebody said to me, oh, Carolyn, you sound annoyed, you seem annoyed, well, how do you know what I am? Because in terms of guesswork, you know, if you're sort of trying to label something that is not your feeling but is my feeling, then that word annoyed, embarrassed is just a label that you would attach to something you think is true, and it may not be, and that could really hack me off if you were to make that assumption. So you'd
get annoyed
trying to label a feeling when it's not your feeling. You don't know what I'm feeling. You're just making a presumption about it.
Yes. So you'd be really nervous about doing that because it might invite a really bad reaction.
Okay, let me answer your question. I would not be really nervous about that. You're assuming, here's the example that you were doing during yours, you're assuming I would be nervous about doing that. What I'd like to know is, yes, the second part of your question, what I'd like to know is how you would avoid getting that bad reaction by making presumptions or assumptions about the other person's feeling.
That's interesting. Okay, so I don't think it's totally avoidable, because sometimes we'll guess right and sometimes we'll guess wrong. My experience is that people, when we guess wrong, like you did somewhat, you say, well, no, you're presuming that I'm worried or I'm nervous about doing that or skeptical. Then they will then tell us the feeling that they are having.
Yeah, you would hope they would, in which case the person would say, No, I'm not. I'm not like I did with you then, albeit in role play. I am nervous, or they might say I'm not nervous. I'm not skeptical. But that at that point.
And then what they'll tend to say is, "I'm not that. I'm this."
Yeah, yeah, and I get that.
Just as if I was to call you Julie, you'd say, "No, it's not Julie."
Yeah.
So my experience is that people will be very quickly correct our assumption because they don't want to be misunderstood.
Or they're hacked off at the fact that you're making assumptions about them.
That's not my experience, but it sounds like it might be yours.
It certainly is with a colleague of mine. I know that he would be very annoyed if I were to try mind reading his emotions.
Have you tried it?
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah.
You said would be.
Told, don't tell me what I'm feeling.
It could be that he's a particularly prickly or individual, but I think one of the words that comes to mind with this is humility. So when I'm empathizing with somebody, I won't say, "Oh, I know what you're feeling. You're annoyed, aren't you?" But it's which would get a really bad reaction. So I'm not annoyed. Don't you? Yeah, exactly. So it's done with humility. So it's more, John, you look annoyed. Yes, but I would even leave and I would say you seem, you look, you sound. And then it's done. If it's done with humility, then people are unlikely to feel invaded or frustrated or irritated that we've, as you put it, tried to read their minds.
Yes. Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks. Okay, I'm going to, so as to preserve the time structure, I'm going to do the closing poll, but please hang on. There is at least one other question that Kate has that I want to do, but I just want to make sure that people, if they need to get away, they can. So here is the final poll that I want to ask you, and here it is. So now, do you think you have a good way to get yourself to have difficult conversations? So vote now. Where are you now with this? On this statement? Okay, there we go. So here is that's it, and here are the results. So the 3% of the not yet has turned into 0. I will tend to put that sort of thing off. Was 23%, now only 4. I think I may be okay. Has jumped from 19 to 34%, and I may now more often find a way. Has gone from 31 to 46%, and now 31% of you versus 10 are pretty confident that they will tackle things head on, which I think is wonderful. I'm just going to scan the Q&A pane. I know there was one more from Kate. So here's your question, Kate. I'm thinking about some feedback I'll have to give a hot-headed manager to tell him he could have handled things differently. He offered a job to someone in another manager's team without telling him. Ooh. The candidate asked for confidentiality. I think he should have discussed it with the candidate and sought his consent to share the information he was going to find out sometime. He will get very cross. Should I say I think there are things you could do next time that would help, or other things you did, or there are things that you did that make it worse? Okay, that's a really cracking question, Kate. Okay, so this is what I would do. I wouldn't give him any advice at all. Certainly not about what to do next time. For me, the classic thing is to give him the feedback as behavioural feedback. Here's the feedback routine that we recommend. It's very similar, in fact identical, to the assertiveness. The first thing is to say how you feel, or how I feel, how you feel. Now, Kate, I don't know if you were actually there. Well, no, let's say I'll take it at face value. What about... Oh, I've gone on to lowercase here. That's interesting. And why? Okay, so here's how it might sound, Kate. I was worried when I heard that you'd offered the job, or that you'd been talking to Peter about Jane and getting a job lined up, because you haven't actually yet spoken to to John, or whatever the first person's name. So I was worried when I heard that you'd gone to somebody else about this guy without even speaking to him. I was worried that you'd gone to someone else about this guy without even speaking to him. And then at the end of that lot, pause. During the pause, the manager who is, you say, is likely to kick off, if he's going to kick off, that's when he'll do it. And then all you have to do is listen. John, you sound annoyed with me for raising it. It sounds like you thought it was okay to do it. You sound irritated with me for criticizing you. And so you handle whatever he comes out with. In the course of that conversation, I am confident that you will get onto some solutions. It will become obvious. So that's the way I would approach it. I hope that's good enough for you, Kate. Thank you for the question. It's a cracker. Also, Caroline, do you want to say your question, Caroline? If you're still there, there we go. Can we open Caroline's line? Hi, Caroline.
Hi, Caroline.
Hi there. I can hear you. Yes, indeed.
Well, like a lot of organisations, we have open plan spaces and not very much in the way of offices. I was just a little bit sort of concerned around the opener and saying to somebody, I want to tell you how I was feeling, or I think one of the examples was that I was annoyed after a meeting yesterday in front of other people in an office. Is that okay?
Well, no, I would say the instant answer is no. Having said that, these open plan offices, they do have cubicles. Obviously, I can hear that's where you are now, so I'm visualizing that, and I'm pretending to be there. What I do think is okay is to go up to the person and to make that opening statement, which is to say, I want to tell you something about how I was feeling after the incident this morning. At that point, the person you'll have their attention, and you can say, should we just get out of here for a second? And so then you can remove yourselves, which I think is really different from saying, can I have a word, please? Or can you step into my office? Because can I have a word, please? Can I have a sec, please? Can you step into my office? Is kind of all the menace, but with no information. But at least with that opening piece of openness, I can say, look, actually, I can even whisper it. Actually, I really wasn't happy with the way it went. I want to talk about it. Now, I wouldn't mind people in neighbouring cubicles overhearing that. Because the I wasn't happy could be for a number of different reasons.
Okay. It's just that it would be very difficult to say anything, and it's not actually in the office that I'm in right now, but without somebody who sat very, very close by hearing what was being said.
Yes. So you're worried that you might cause offence to the person you were starting the conversation with by embarrassing them in front of a colleague.
Well, exactly. And I suppose the other thing is that as you develop this as a way of dealing with problems, then people pick up on those cues as well, don't they? So potentially the person next to them will know that actually it is that's your cue for a difficult conversation, effectively, albeit.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. So if we compare that to the cues that everybody knows now, which is, can I have a word, please? Or somebody sticking their head over the parapet and doing this, or it's like it's a jungle, isn't it? It's a jungle out there, and we're all watching ourselves and other people. And so I suppose what you're pointing out to me, it really boils down to how palatable can we make this? How tidy and quick can we make this? Because people will always pick up when someone else is in trouble.
Yes.
And that is the blight of the open plan office. Great in some respects, but makes it very difficult for supervisors and managers to do anything in private. So I guess it's in public we do what we think is the least humiliating, the most respectful, the most direct, and that will mean parting with a little bit of information which was not meant for the bystanders. Tricky one, but thank you for that one. Thank you, Caroline. Okay, and Greta, do you want your line open? Okay, here we go. I'm going to read the question. So if you don't want to say anything in the open office, how would you extract the person from the group? Oh, okay. So it sounds like we've covered that one. I think you've just got to part with a little bit of the truth, but do it in a way which you don't mind having overheard. So that is definitely tricky. I don't deny it, but I think I'd feel comfortable. And you've got to find ways to be direct and feel comfortable. Which is to look, I want to talk about the meeting this morning. Let's go somewhere quiet. So maybe that's getting as close to the truth as you can. That's where I would be pitching this. Okay. Any other questions? I'm quickly. Okay, we've got one from Jan as well. I need to tell someone his view of himself and how everyone sees him is at odds. Basically, he wants a senior job and he has none of the managerial skills to do that. And also a couple of others. So I'm just going to remove. Oh gosh, that's a really tricky one, Jan. So somebody thinks they're great and they want promotion or they want a managerial job, and you're thinking, no way, Jose, you're just not up to it. I think the one for that is to I don't know if you've got the Openplan issue as well, but really think of that very first opening sentence and try and make it as accurate as you can. I bet you're probably thinking, go on then, have a go at it. So I'm going to have a go. I'm going to stick my neck out, Jan. I'm going to say something like, John, I want to have a conversation about you wanting to become a manager. I've got some real reservations. And I think that would probably be the worst. And then they say, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And then I would have a couple of pieces of feedback for them, which is behavioural feedback, how I felt, what about, and why. There have been a number of instances that, John, that I've seen you, shouting at people or dismissing people very quickly, which have made me really uncomfortable because it didn't look like they were at all happy about it, or I'm not comfortable that would be a good way to deal with it as a leader. So, but the key principle is to try and make your opening statement really informative. Hopefully that does it for you. Tony, I'm going to see if I can find the. Okay, so I'm going to have a look at the Q&A page. Same principles if talking to a team. Yes, Tony. So Tony say the same principles apply if I'm talking to a team. Yes. However, if you have particular feedback for individuals, obviously you know the drill. Then you find some way of separating them from the pack, and then that's when you give them the feedback. If it's positive feedback, obviously it's in the round. But yes, I think it is. It is the same principles. The only thing I would say, Tony, there's a little alarm bell ringing in my head, which is something along the lines of I must make sure that if I've got feedback for one or two individuals, I don't scattergun it to the team, hoping that the one or two individuals will pick it out for themselves. Thereby, in other words, criticising the whole team when my criticism was only meant for two people and I didn't really want to have the conversation with them. Hopefully, Tony, that answers or does justice to your question. Niraj, if we put this difficult conversation in the context of a cold call meeting, are there any particular elements that you would recommend changing or paying more attention to in this process? Now, a cold call meeting, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that, but I'm going to take a guess. But you can always say something. unless you want to type another couple of words. A cold call meeting, I think you've just dropped into somebody's office. I'm assuming it's not a sales meeting, but it's more of a just dropping in. If that's the case, yes, these principles apply. So I'm visualizing myself now. I go into stick my head around someone's office and say, Niraj, I want to talk to you about the way the budgeting's going so far. Do you have a moment now? It's serious. Or, Niraj, do you have a moment now? I have something to talk about which I need to get off my chest. So yeah, I mean, it's just getting to the point quickly. No preamble if you can manage it. I'm hoping that does, in the context of sales. Okay, now, thank you very much. In the context of a sales meeting, meeting someone for the first time, selling a product or service that they may not have recognized the need for. That's an interesting one. So this is quite a positive scenario, by the way, by the sound of it. In sales situations, I think getting to we talk about the cherry in the cake, and we tend to spend a lot of time on the cake and then put the cherry in there. I'm very much in favour of going straight for the cherry. So if whether the sales meeting is premeditated or not, the way I might ask you, I'll challenge you, Niraj, to try this out, and I think you should enjoy this. It's to get to the point to say, well, look, Mr. Prospect, the reason I'm here is not just because I was passing, but because I actually really would like you to buy some of this, and I want to explain it to you. And if by the end you're not quite ready, that's absolutely fine. But I'm really hoping that you'll buy some, or that you'll order this, or that we can go to the next stage with that. So I have a tendency to start with the punchline and then do the story, so that there is not that awkward moment at the end where we have to, ask for the sale. I would challenge you, I would suggest you experiment with asking for the sale at the beginning of the meeting, not 3/4 of the way through. I'm hoping that answers your question, but say if it doesn't. Oh, there was one thing that Kate said. You're still here, Kate. Yeah, this is a good one. I don't know if we've covered this. Kate's thinking, okay, well, Kate's worried that I could make somebody more angry, or she could make someone more angry by empathizing with anger. So saying something like, "You sound, you sound really annoyed about X, Y, Z, John. I guess that's because you think I'm wrong." And he says, "Annoyed? Too right, I'm annoyed. Da 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 da." Now, when that happens, it does sound like we've made it worse. Actually, what we've done is just open the floodgates, and that is the time to stay brave and not head for the hills, take shelter, and be prepared to empathize again. So the second piece of empathy might sound like, "Whoa, I can see that you're much angrier than I thought you were." I guess that's because you've really you haven't had you think I'm somehow to blame, or you don't even want to be talking about it right now. So my standpoint is pursue it. And when it sounds like it's getting worse, it means that your empathy is working, because you're giving them permission to totally open up to you. And I think that's a good thing. It's not very nice to be with, but it is a very good thing. Thank you for sticking around for this extended Q&A. It was great. Thank you for all your questions, Kate and Tony and Niraj, Greta. Fantastic. And thank you for all your inputs as well. Have terrific weekends all round, and see you next month, if not before.